The foundation of Putin's regime, which enabled the Kremlin to unleash war against Ukraine.
Whoever attempts to interfere with us in any way, and especially those who seek to create threats or dangers to our country and to our people, must be fully aware that Russia's response will be immediate, decisive, and resolute. This response will inevitably lead you to consequences and repercussions such as you have never experienced or faced at any point in your entire history.
The nuclear club that Putin brandishes from time to time to intimidate Western countries.
For Europe, let's put it this way. The launches of such missiles, the demonstration of such launches, is a real threat.
On the eve of his conversation with the US president, the Russian dictator came up with yet another show of force-air training and combat launch of the RS-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missile.
A tactic of intimidation. Russia is planning a training and combat launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile with the aim of exerting demonstrative pressure and intimidation on Ukraine, as well as EU and NATO member states. The aggressor state, Russia, on the night of May 19, 2025, intends to carry out a training and combat launch of an RS-24 intercontinental ballistic missile from the Yars complex.
But as is often the case in Russia, something went wrong and the Yars launch did not take place. What kind of missile is this, and why did this show of force turn into a fiasco for the Russians? We'll cover that next in Arsenal. The RS-24 Yars is a Russian strategic missile system with a solid-fueled ICBM, mobile or silo-based, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle, Mir warhead. The missile was developed at the Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology.
There are approximately 1.5 times more Yars missiles than all other Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles combined. Currently, according to widely recognized international sources such as Military Air Power and other reputable organizations, it is reported that the Russians have 180 mobile Yars intercontinental ballistic missile systems alone. So if you add up all the systems on 180 mobile launchers plus 24 silo-based Yars missile systems, you get a combined total of over 200 operational missile systems. In other words, there are about twice as many Yars missiles as all the other missiles combined.
In other words, while Russian propaganda and following it, the brainwashed Russians sing praises to the Tsarnet.
3, 2, 1. Launch at Washington.
Foundation. Of Russia's nuclear forces is the Yars missile system.
The other components of Russia's nuclear forces are missiles on submarines, which are far fewer, comparatively speaking, than missiles on 160 strategic bombers.
Yars is a modification of the Topol-M missile system. The first test launch was carried out in May 2007 at the Plesetsk range. In the future, Yars will become the basis for Putin's Burevestnik, which the occupiers launched at the Ukrainian city of...
Just like the Burevestnik, the RS-24 missile has a multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle warhead with individually guided blocks. In other words, the Yars has several warheads that, upon separation, can strike multiple targets with just a single missile launch.
The missile itself has a separable warhead, typically divided into 3 or 4, depending on the yield 3 or 4 individually guided warheads. The yield of each warhead, in terms of TNT equivalent, is up to half a megaton, that is 500 kilotons. For comparison, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was 20 kilotons, so this is 25 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
The Yars missile system operates on the principle of if you have enough power, you don't need accuracy.
Its accuracy is not very high, and for example, you can't use it with a conventional warhead because its accuracy is about 120 or 150 meters. That's the circular error probable. So a high explosive warhead wouldn't be effective here.
The technical specifications of the RS-24 Yars missile are as follows: warhead yield of 150 kilotons, length of 21.9 meters, weight of 46.5 tons, an accuracy margin of 150 meters, and a range of 11,000 kilometers. The impressive flight range is sufficient so that during exercises and test launches, European and American cities could potentially fall within the strike radius.
And both Brussels and Washington are paying attention to this blackmail.
I'm absolutely certain that if the Russians didn't have nuclear weapons, we would be in Ukraine and would have driven them out. But they do have nuclear weapons. I don't consider it impossible for NATO troops to participate in a war against Russia, but in that case, NATO would be at risk as an alliance.
When it comes to confronting intercontinental ballistic missiles, the problem lies in the missile defense systems, which are lacking not only in Ukraine, but throughout all of Europe. For example, the Patriot systems themselves lack the mass and kinetic energy needed to neutralize a huge missile falling vertically. Only the American THAAD system, the Israeli Arrow 3, and the US Aegis system, which is installed on warships, are capable of countering strategic warheads. The THAAD system, which cost approximately $3 billion, first detects a ballistic missile at a distance of up to 1,000 kilometers and then intercepts it at an altitude of 150,000 meters. Why exactly the Russians did not launch the Yars missile, as reported by Ukrainian intelligence, remains unknown. According to experts, it is most likely that problems and malfunctions were discovered during the preparation process. And so, in order to prevent what was intended as blackmail from turning into embarrassment, the Kremlin decided to postpone the launch.
There are many options. It's quite obvious that during the preparation for the launch, some kind of parameter discrepancy was discovered. The preparation for launch involves many stages. First of all, the launch platform leaves the parkwell, the division space, and moves to its operational area, taking up position. The coordinates of the launch point are entered and the launch is carried out. But before that, of course, all the missile systems are checked. Obviously, something went wrong during this process and the launch was postponed.
It's worth recalling here that in recent years, the Kremlin has accumulated a wealth of embarrassing experience in brandishing its nuclear club. For example, in 2023, Russia failed twice in testing the Yars missile, simply veered off course. And in September 2024, at the Plesetsk Cosmodrome, an RS-24 Sarmat missile exploded right in the launch silo, which only reinforces doubts about the reliability of Russian strategic weapons.
If the missile exploded right in the silo, the launch silo, then it's a problem with the power unit, with the engine itself, that's it. Or with the engine control system, right? That's regarding the Sarmat.
That's all for now. Don't forget to write in the comments which types of weapons you'd like to learn more about. Like this video and of course subscribe to our Arsenal channel. The link is in the description below the video.
The Russians were unable to launch the RS-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missile. According to Defense Express, despite the Kremlin's plans to carry out a so-called training and combat launch of the ballistic missile on the night of May 19, all indications are that it simply did not happen. The main intelligence directorate reported that the Russians planned to carry out the launch from an area near the settlement of Svobodny in Russia's Sverdlovsk region. According to the publication's analysts, if the launch had taken place, local residents would have witnessed it and photos would very likely have appeared online. In September of last year, the test of the RS-24 Sarmat intercontinental missile failed. An OSINT analyst published a photo showing the aftermath of the failed test at the Plesetsk test site. At that time, the missile exploded in the silo, which resulted in the formation of a large crater and the destruction of part of the test site. November 2023. The RS-24 Yars ballistic missile veered off course. This was reported by Ukrainian intelligence. In October of the same year, the test launch of the Bulava ballistic missile also ended in failure.
This missile was supposed to keep the West in fear for many years to come and become a truly powerful, invincible weaponry for Russia.
This missile has unlimited range of operation.
Its success was supposed to be guaranteed by a unique technology that even the United States failed to implement. In reality, yet another of Putin's nuclear toys failed to scare anyone. And so far, the only ones it has destroyed are its own developers, who still haven't managed to conduct a successful test.
In total, they believe that 7 people died there, 5 of them were developers and 2 were test site staff.
The nuclear missile Burevestnik, the very one that was supposed to utterly devastate and turn the United Kingdom into radioactive ash, became the single biggest failure of the Russian defense industry in recent years and a colossal personal embarrassment for Putin. What was it designed for? What unique qualities was it supposed to have, and why, after failing more than 10 tests, can the engineers manage a successful launch of this so-called wonder missile? We'll talk about all this right now on Arsenal. The nuclear missile Burevestnik is probably the flagship of all Russian no-analogs developments. After all, there really is nothing like it anywhere else. The first time people heard about this missile was on March 1, 2018. It was this very missile that Putin spoke about so pompously before the State Duma more than 6 years ago.
A low-flying, stealthy cruise missile carrying a nuclear warhead with virtually unlimited range, an unpredictable flight path, and the ability to bypass interception lines is invulnerable to all existing and future missile defense and air defense systems. The results of the tests we conducted have enabled us to begin developing a fundamentally new type of strategic weapon, equipped with high-yield nuclear warheads.
Since then, the missile has remained nothing more than a creation of Kremlin animators. However, experts believe that the idea itself was not a bad one. The fact is, Russian engineers simply proved incapable of making it happen. After all, the main feature of the Burevestnik was supposed to be its engine. And in this area, ever since Soviet times, Ukraine has always been number one.
The missile is launched and accelerated using a conventional turbojet engine. After acceleration, the nuclear engine is activated on board. It has a compact mini reactor, and after acceleration, once the incoming air actually starts entering, the engine gets thoroughly heated and then expelled through the nozzles, thus producing already highly heated air, and thereby efficiently generating jet thrust.
Apart from the engine, there was basically nothing else that needed to be developed. After all, the missile body and warhead are long-finished Soviet projects well known to Ukrainians under the name KH-101.
It's actually a missile of relatively small dimensions. It's about 12 meters long. So after being dropped, it actually consists of a standard solid fuel rocket booster and essentially a missile with a ramjet engine. In terms of shape, it has in cross-section, it's roughly elliptical, about 1 by 1.5 meters approximately.
But in its standard configuration, the missile's range is about 5,500 kilometers. That's quite a lot, but in the Kremlin, they decided it wasn't enough and came up with the Burevestnik. Now, engineers are working on the challenge of assembling a mini nuclear reactor, which is supposed to become the missile's new engine and give it fantastic capabilities.
In fact, this missile has unlimited range, right? That's it. So if cruise missiles can fly for hours, then a missile with a nuclear reactor can fly for days, right? It can circle the planet several times.
It's worth noting here that it's fair to confidently place the Burevestnik in the has no analogs category, because civilized countries simply abandoned this idea, replacing it with safer alternatives.
The Americans also worked on developing similar missiles with nuclear engines, with nuclear power units, but then they abandoned these projects as well because they were deemed dangerous. And the level of technology did not allow for, safe use of these reactors.
But of course, the dangers did not scare the Russians neither during development nor in further use. It's worth noting that even if everything had gone smoothly, the Burevestnik itself is clearly a technology from the past.
The problem is that a cruise missile flies at low altitudes. There have been various reports in the press suggesting that the Burevestnik can fly at altitudes ranging from several dozen meters up to several kilometers. The problem is that it is equipped with a ramjet engine, This information comes from open sources. Russian media have reported this. It flies low altitude and leaves radioactive exhaust behind.
In other words, along its entire flight path, the Burevestnik will leave radioactive contamination.
In fact, it's a flying mini Chernobyl, a flying Chernobyl, right? Because after the emission, this so-called radioactive exhaust, in the end, ultimately ends up contaminating and polluting the atmosphere.
But of course, there were incidents along the way. The main one happened in 2019 during tests of a nuclear engine at a test site in the Arkhangelsk region.
Various meteorological stations in that area 4-in-1 specifically recorded a sharp spike in radiation. After that, several people were taken to the Arkhangelsk regional hospital. Some of them died there. In total, it is believed that 7 people died, 5 of them were developers, and 2 were test site employees. And when they were brought to the hospital, they were transported naked, in bags, right?
After that, everyone promptly signed non-disclosure agreements, and the tests continued. Incidentally, with the same lack of success.
There was a story about how they launched this missile and it fell into the Barents Sea. After that, they cordoned off the area, restricted access, and searched the seabed for the missile so the Americans wouldn't discover the secret of the nuclear engine, the nuclear power unit.
According to analysts, there have already been over a dozen tests under the Burevestnik project, and not a single one has succeeded. At the same time, each attempt has left a radioactive trace and put civilians at risk.
The project is extremely dangerous, literally for all of humanity, and well, first and foremost for the residents of Russia, because they're testing this damn thing practically right outside their windows.
But, of course, the Kremlin can't be stopped by calls for safety. The tests continue again and again in the hope that the doomsday weapon will eventually take off. Burevestnik's main goal is to target mines, not territories, of Western officials.
Obviously, they're trying to revive the topic of nuclear threats. It's unlikely anyone will take seriously the 101st threat that hasn't been carried out. That's why they decided to play it this way, to conduct tests, thereby showing on one hand they have a resource, and on the other to demonstrate seriousness of their intentions.
Speaking of the practicality of using the Burevestnik, engineers agree that while this weapon is formidable, it is also unreliable.
This whole story is theoretically possible and actually feasible, but in practice it is quite complicated because all the processes involved are very unstable.
At the same time, some of the design solutions directly contradict each other. Simply put, even the most thoroughly tested and, God forbid, mass-produced Burevestnik can always malfunction.
The presence of a nuclear installation on board has a sharply negative impact on the missile's navigation system. So it turns out that it's difficult to precisely determine where it will fall or, well, where it will hit the target, because a malfunction can occur at any moment.
At the same time, the practical use of the Burevestnik is highly questionable, according to experts. Even with a nuclear engine, the missile is still a cruise missile, and for Western air defense systems, it has long been a very easy target.
Even if this missile has unlimited range, it still won't be able to break through serious air defenses, because its speed is quite low. It's a subsonic missile. If it tries to strike either Europe or the United States, it will be immediately detected by airborne radar surveillance aircraft and shot down by any air defense missile system it encounters along the way.
The Kremlin probably understands this as well. That's why many analysts think the Burevestnik was an adventure from the start, sold to Putin to get billions from the budget. There's a high chance this so-called wonder missile will stay just a cartoon, one the Kremlin dictator is proud of.
The country is not capable of developing a smartphone. The country is not capable of producing decent cars, not even super luxury ones, but at least normal cars that can drive 10,000 kilometers without breaking down. And yet it wants to develop a cruise missile with a nuclear propulsion system? Oh, come on.
Did you like this video? Then don't forget to give it a like and be sure to subscribe to our new Arsenal channel. The link is in the description below the video.